Okay.
Okay. All right.
So thanks everyone for joining us. We're very happy to see so many of you on our second Engaged Journalism Exchange attempt here. I'm Andrea Wenzel. I'm an assistant professor at Temple University and a co-founder of the Germantown Info Hub Community Journalism Project. Jake.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jake Nelson. I'm an assistant professor at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at ASU, and someone who just does research on this kind of thing and has been really happy to work with Andrea on bringing researchers and practitioners together in this space for a while.
Back at you. And so we're going to be doing, for the AJMC conference, which is now officially going to be an online conference, we're going to be doing a pre-conference on engaged journalism, and that's how this sort of got started. That's going to be on August 5th, so hopefully many of you can join us for that. We'll share more details about times later, but it will be a virtual thing, and thanks to our co-sponsors for that. That includes Tau Center, ASU, Temple, the Agora Journalism Center at Oregon, and Northwestern's Medill School. And so we kicked off this conversation last month because everyone was sort of grappling with how do we do engaged journalism in this moment in COVID days. And we heard from a lot of you that you wanted to continue having circling back monthly on different kind of elements of that theme. And so this month, we're going to be focusing on how some smaller newsrooms are doing things with a tight budget. They've always had a tight budget. Many of us are now having tighter budgets. And so thinking about how, looking at their examples of how they're serving their communities, often in areas that there's communities that are not well served by larger mainstream outfits. So we're going to give you all a chance to talk about these issues more in small groups in just a little bit, and we'll try to devote a bit more time and have a bit more structure this time for our breakouts. But I want to give the floor to our two editors joining us. In a minute, we'll hear from Pedro Hernandez from Ivanhoe Soul in California, and I'll let him introduce himself properly. Also wanted to give a shout out to Olivia Henry for suggesting that we talk to him, who was on the call last time. But first I'll kick it over to Michael Romaine, who wears so many hats that I think I'll let him explain, but he's the editor of multiple community newspapers, including Austin Weekly News and Village Free Press in Chicago and the suburbs of Chicago. So I'll open it up to them to share more about how they've been adapting their engaged journalism work and making the most of their limited budgets. So Mike, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Andrea, for allowing me to do this. So as Andrea said, I'm Michael Romaine, publisher of Village Free Press and editor of Austin Weekly News, which is a weekly newspaper that circulates on the west side of Chicago, primarily in the Austin, West Garfield Park, and North Lawndale neighborhoods. Village Free Press is a publication that I started in 2013, which circulates in Maywood, Bellwood, Broadview, and Merrill's Park, which are Chicago suburbs. And I'll get a bit, and this is my contact information if anybody needs it. But my focus is primarily on how we have been, I guess, how we are structured as a one-person newsroom, and how our structure has been actually beneficial during the COVID-19 crisis, and what weaknesses that the crisis has brought on, and how they may have exacerbated some of the weaknesses that we came into this crisis with. So this is a bit about me. I think I'll go to this slide. I hope you guys can see this. This is kind of just a breakdown of how our organizational structure. So Wednesday Journal is the overall entity that owns 4 independent newspapers, weekly newspapers in the Chicago suburbs, including the Forest Park Review, which I contribute to as an education reporter, Wednesday Journal of Oak Park and River Forest, which I contribute to as an education reporter, the Riverside Brookfield Landmark, which I don't contribute to, and Austin Weekly News, which I edit. So I'm essentially a one-person part-time editor of Austin Weekly News. I share that job with being a education beat reporter for Forest Park and Wednesday Journal. And in addition to this, I own Village Free Press outright. So this works because I started Village Free Press in 2013. The deal was that for me to start working for Wednesday Journal, which I started in 2015, working there, they would need to allow me to continue my work at Village Free Press. They did, and it's been pretty fruitful. In 2016, we were given the opportunity to actually go into print. So Village Free Press has been a weekly print newspaper. We've distributed 3,000 copies a week every Wednesday in Maywood and 3 other surrounding suburbs. We make this work because of collaborations, which you can see on the right side of your screen. Some of them are maybe, you may not be able to see all of them. But we've done third-party collaborations with entities like City Bureau, the Chicago Reporter, Austin Talks, TAL, BGA, and ProPublica. And I want to get back to how Wednesday Journal and Village Free Press also work on the print side. We actually share a printer. We share sales people, sales teams, design and circulation teams. And we also share a newsroom, which we currently can't share right now because of the COVID-19 crisis. But we also share content. And the fact that I work full-time for Wednesday Journal is important because I can do what I do with Village Free Press. So it's a pretty good synergy. I crossed this out because as of a few months ago, Growing Community Media, Wednesday Journal became Growing Community Media, which is now a nonprofit. So some of the collaborations that we've established with entities like City Bureau, that collaboration looks a bit like this. In 2019, we did this thing called the Austin People Powered Voter Guide. It was a 12 to 16 page print special edition resource guide that was all focused on the aldermanic and mayoral elections that year. We also did a public newsroom where we invited, it was essentially a town hall to talk about election issues that City Bureau and Austin Weekly News partnered on. And this content is still available on the web. We actually are up for a Lizagore Award for Best Special News Section. We also collaborate. I want to talk in particular about collaboration with respect to COVID and how that's worked out. Chicago Reporter has this great COVID-19 zip code tracker, which allows you to drill down and see COVID-19 statistics by zip code. That's been really helpful for smaller publications like mine. They essentially reached out to editors of weekly newspapers all over the city and the suburbs, asking them to essentially share this link on their websites for free. And so now it's available to my readers on my site, and we eventually plan on putting it on the site of Austin Weekly News too. Collaboration again, BGA and another organization, ProPublica Illinois, they did a pretty in-depth article on AIDS, caring for senior citizens who are inadvertently bringing to those senior citizens the virus because they did not have adequate PPE and some other challenges. That was a pretty in-depth article that they encouraged us to share in our publications, and I shared that in Village Free Press. So some strengths with respect to COVID-19. Collaboration, as I mentioned, has been key. Surprisingly, print has been an important factor in terms of our survival as a one-room news operation. The fact that I went into print for Village Free Press has actually been paying off. I talked to somebody, a guy at the Center for Community Media at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY. He said a lot of hyperlocal weekly publications who are in print are seeing that the legal notice revenue, the public notice revenue that they've been getting, it's actually been helping us. It's a saving grace. That's the most consistent revenue that we have, and we still rely on it. It still comes in despite COVID-19. It may be delayed, but it's still coming in. So that's important. That's helped offset the loss of advertising. Another way to be resilient is establishing a narrative of need. A lot of news organizations are doing this. I'm not the only one, but a few months ago, Village Free Press put together a campaign on Facebook and via our email subscriber list, just asking people to donate, trying to build a narrative of why we are necessary in the community and having people buy in, because this is a critical time. We had a goal of $10,000 to raise in about 2 or 3 months. We're almost halfway there. And also establishing flexibility, which I'll get to a little bit later, but being able to do not just your core value, but also things that can bring you additional revenue, which is what I'll end on. And also being able to cut costs. Village Free Press, for instance, usually circulates 3,000 copies in our immediate service area. We had to cut that to 1,000. And we're also considering going from 12 pages of newsprint to 8, just to save costs. Some challenges: while print has been a strength, it's also potentially a weakness. And that's because as more and more states face budget holes, more and more state lawmakers, particularly Republican lawmakers, are going to be calling for possible law changes that will no longer require local governments to pay us to run legal notices. And if that happens, that's going to be a big challenge that'll cut into our legal advertisement revenue, which has been so consistent for us over so many years. Crisis fatigue has been another weakness. I think the last 5 or 6 cover pages of both Austin Weekly News and Village Free Press have featured people with masks. I think our audience is getting a little exhausted with all the COVID-19 coverage. A challenge is trying to seek stories that that don't just exploit crisis, but go beyond crisis and get into some deeper issues, and how to establish a sense of normalcy in a time where crisis is just everywhere. And another challenge: boots at the door. We talk about boots on the ground journalism, but right now our boots are at the door. We're not on the ground because we can't go anywhere for the most part. I'm working from my home, so that's been a challenge. The newsroom that we had in Oak Park, where Wednesday Journal / Growing Community Media is based, is everybody's at home, so everything is being done on Zoom. It's not the same as being next to somebody and being able to share ideas in person. So going forward, how we plan to leverage our strengths. We've created this program called News Ambassadors out of a partnership with TAL. And they came in last year, conducted a series of workshops, polled some of our readers, and to get a sense of how we could improve and grow. And an idea that came out of that was for us to select a series of engaged community members, audience members, readers, who would want to go above and beyond just simply reading the news, and helping us actually formulating the news and informing what the news is. So we plan on selecting between 5 and 10 people to be news ambassadors on a special COVID-19 project. So essentially we want to create, leverage our ability to print in order to create these special COVID-19 resource guides. So we want to identify the most vulnerable people in our population, mainly seniors who are stuck at home, who can't go anywhere, particularly seniors in single family homes or just stuck inside. We want to identify them, create a guide, a COVID-19 resource guide that would also have information about the census and other important issues, and just basically deliver it to their front door. So this would require us to create some strategic partnerships. One such partnership I've identified already is a community organization in Maywood. It's an immigrant rights organization that's currently working on the census despite COVID-19. What they did was created a list of, they actually identified a list of roughly 10,000 people. They've called about 3,000 people on that list. What we want to do is partner with that organization and leverage their context, their list, in order to get these guides into the hands of the most vulnerable population in our community. And in addition to the guide, there'll be, we'll leverage our ability to tell stories that give people a sense of hope despite the chaos and the crisis. And so hopefully this will allow us to lean on our audience. We still have a robust audience of readers who look forward to our print product every week, who come into our website via Facebook. We have roughly 7,000 Facebook followers, and we get a pretty robust amount of traffic on our digital site. We hope to lean into that going forward in order to execute this special project. That's the end.
Thank you, Mike. That's really interesting and a lot to think about. I think we're gonna hopefully hear some questions from some people in a bit. If you haven't seen, please, if you have questions for Mike or for Pedro, please note them in the chat, and we'll have some time to discuss in a minute. I want to pass over to Pedro. Mike, can you stop sharing your screen? And Pedro, I don't know if you want to share yours, but if you do, feel free.
Sure, just give me a second. I think, okay. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I want to just do a quick time check. How much time do I have?
Not a ton.
Okay.
Ideally like 5-ish minutes.
All right, I will make this work. So good morning, everyone. My name is Pedro Hernandez. Yeah, like it's been mentioned, I'm the editor-in-chief for the Ivanhoe Sol community newsletter. A little bit about myself. I'm actually not a trained editor. I used to be a high school history teacher, and for the last 5 or 6 years, I've worked professionally with environmental justice nonprofits in Central California, working on especially rural communities. And so a lot of that experience is tied into my role now as the editor for the newspaper. But where is Ivanhoe? That's a question we ask for people who are even local, that we get a lot from people that are local. It's in Central California. So it's a rural community. It's unincorporated, which means it does not have a city council. It's surrounded by agricultural orchards. And so, and also it's a high percentage low-income community as well. So there's a lot of existing social and environmental vulnerabilities that set the context for a lot of our work as well. But what exactly is this newspaper? It was established actually relatively recently. So in December of 2019, it's bilingual and it's distributed to every house in the Ivanhoe zip code. And so it's completely free. And every article that we include is fully bilingual because we believe language access is integral, especially in the news environment where a lot of Spanish media has been on the decline. Again, it's completely community run and operated, and the very purpose is to meet the needs of the community, which I'll get into kind of in this structure. There's essentially, again, we try to be responsive to everyone, and one of the ways is by casting as wide of a net as possible. So as far as content submission and feedback, this is everything from readers, the Ivanhoe Community Council, which is the local grassroots group that's advocating on behalf of the community. We work with school districts, community centers, and even nonprofit partners, for example, healthcare networks or other advocacy organizations to connect folks with opportunities to address some of the main issues. Our funders are the Internews and the Listening Post Collective, and they also do provide some logistical support, like, for example, establishing like a text message to get access to our readers and kind of those kind of refined skills that we don't have in-house. But the way our newsletter is structured, we have an editorial team, an executive team that works as community liaisons and also supports the work of the editorial team with getting interviews or just, overall helping increase awareness about our project because it is relatively new. And we do have a partnership with the Sun Gazette that is the only locally owned newspaper in the San Joaquin Valley, so in Central California. And so we work with them. They print and they distribute the newspaper, but they also support the overall like graphic design and also contribute staff time of their own for investigative journalism that complements our own investigative journalism in-house. But it started off initially with an information ecosystem report and a needs assessment. Again, I've worked in the community of Ivanhoe for about 4 years, so I've been kind of familiar, but we wanted to get a sense of what folks on the ground thought was the best way to address their information needs. And so this is actually what the first issue looked like. The issues were very like widespread, including like park cleanup, the establishment of a food pantry, tax preparation services, and also an update with one of the campaigns to establish green space in the community as well. So it's very eclectic, and we kind of respond however we need to and we want to, and which is honestly a great part about being an autonomous newspaper. But again, also something that we're trying to do very intentionally is to highlight like the good stuff that's going on too. That was very like explicit in what folks wanted. And so, for our last month's issue, we did a section on a car parade that the teachers organized for the school district in the area as well too. So like it's definitely advocacy oriented and addressing all these other issues, but we do want to provide just something that folks can see themselves in and, address some of the issues like the crisis fatigue, which is obviously impacting a lot of folks. And we also, have a section for community art and creative writing. So anything that folks would want to contribute from the community, we try to elevate that as well. But going to COVID, right? This is a bit outdated. Now we're about 800 cases for COVID in Tulare County. And so we're the second highest as far as density of COVID impacts in the San Joaquin Valley. And of course, this has affected vulnerable populations like farm workers and has exacerbated existing issues like lack of affordable housing. And so we're responding to the COVID issue by and this is a little bit more of a breakdown, where Ivanhoe is surrounded by some of the hotspots like Visalia and the city of Tulare. But we've tried to respond to the COVID issue in a couple of ways. Instead of connecting folks with advocacy opportunities, we still do that, but we're shifting to direct advocacy. So we're taking public stances on public policy that would benefit the community of Ivanhoe. We're also increasing watchdogging of streamed public meetings, which I'll get into in a couple seconds. We have an increased online presence and expanding content creation beyond our monthly intervals because of our low budget, we can only afford to do an actual print copy once a month. So again, we're trying to utilize social media and create a website for ourselves too, just to increase access overall. We're using our discretionary funds for technical infrastructure like laptops and Zoom subscriptions for folks on our team as well too. And also trying to expand issues with language access during our shift to like a webinar format. But this is an example of how the content of our newsletter has shifted. We're highlighting the calls for an eviction moratorium in Tulare County. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we're seeing farm workers, school district employees, kind of everyone affected by partial or full loss of their income. However, the local county representatives are very conservative and take developer money, and so they're not necessarily open to halting evictions in the area. For example, the sheriffs are still providing lockouts for folks as well too. So we're taking that direct stance and produced, in my opinion, one of the best pieces of journalism, investigative journalism that I've seen in our overall area. And another thing we've done is take on issues like racism. Some of our watchdogging has like revealed like racist comments from the county supervisors, and so we definitely like took a stance and do things like public statements on stances about how our small news outlet weighs in when other news outlets that are more prominent are kind of taking a more neutral stance or, you know, encouraging this type of behavior. And also what we're doing is shifting to a kind of like town hall series as well in response to the lack of transparency and inclusiveness to the county of Tulare's coverage about coronavirus. For example, they mostly dump statistics and don't highlight any of the frontline workers or community impacts as well too. And so we did a webinar actually this last weekend, which reached about 1,000 people. And given that this was our first kind of trial, I mean, we thought it was very successful, but we highlighted, we had an emergency room physician, we had someone who works at the local food pantries, we had an environmental justice advocate, we had someone from the community of Ivanhoe as well too. So we're trying to provide narratives that other folks are not providing in this space as well. And we're going to keep continuing to do this as a way to both to increase the advocacy capacity for the community, but also provide some of the journalistic coverage that again is lacking in an area that is experiencing some of the COVID impacts in some of the most severe ways. And so in interest of time, and I know we have a Q&A section, I'll kind of wrap it up there. But if anyone wants more information or to get into contact with me, it's theivanhoesoul@gmail.com. And yeah, thank you everyone. And I'll be looking forward to the questions and discussions after.
This is great. Thank you so much, Pedro. So you guys are both doing so much with, you know, not necessarily huge budgets, and it's I think we can all learn a lot from what you're doing. And now I'm realizing I should have read through all of the chat while that was going on, but I was so interested in what you were saying. So now I'm going to scramble and try to look at all your great questions. So maybe I'm just going to start going through some of them. So Angeli asked Michael, what were some of the challenges of working with a community organization for distribution in particular? Mike, did you want to weigh in on that?
We actually haven't started working with them yet. This project that I had mentioned that we'll do with TAL funding is actually in the very beginning phases. And so we're still trying to work out the kinks in that. We'll probably rely on, in terms of distributing the product, we'll rely not just on them, but there are a variety of strategic partners that we've identified to try to identify the most vulnerable people in our population. We're going to lean on local governments too, and on the township, so they won't be the only one. But yeah, again, it's still a work in progress.
And I think this is, well, I think you already started working on this too, but Joy also asked, how did you choose your ambassadors?
Yeah, we did. We started working on the ambassador program like late last year. We were building up to a series of workshops. We were going to basically open the door to anybody in the community who was interested in coming to receive a 1 hour. Well, no, it'd be a 3-hour training. It would be paid, and they'd get training in a variety of areas, including fundraising, meeting facilitation. So if we were to do town halls, they'd be the people who would be facilitating the town halls on a variety of subjects, census being one of them. But I guess COVID-19 would naturally be something that they could facilitate as well. Some of this stuff, some of the roles can gravitate toward virtual. So we can still train potential ambassadors to facilitate Zoom town halls on COVID-19 and on other issues. But yeah, it's basically first, anybody who is willing to be one, they can come. If they're willing to go through the 3-hour training, which is paid, they can do that. And that's basically how we're going to get them. We got one so far, and I think I saw another question with respect to how they being engaged in the process. One potential ambassador is a guy who lives in a nursing home facility in Maywood, and I've been talking to him since this whole COVID-19 crisis, and he's in terms of identifying needs. He said that people in that facility need face masks. They don't have PPE. They're locked in their rooms all day. So he's a good source, not just of he's not just a potential partner in terms of helping us facilitate meetings and Zoom meetings and stuff like that, but he's a good source of potential news stories too.
Cool. I see that Jennifer asked, this could be for either of you, so maybe Pedro, if you have any thoughts. Have you seen changes in readers' comfort with print in this contactless era? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ways, actually the conversations we've been trying to have, again, just to make sure that like what we're putting out in our content is well received as well too. So we've actually seen a pretty warm response with at least our particular project. And I think one of the reasons is also because there is an internet gap in rural areas as well. So one of the reasons why we wanted to provide a physical copy of all this critical information is, again, to address like that gap, and also to address issues like if someone is illiterate, for example, like we're building capacity in the overall community to convey this information within their own networks. And so we've actually seen a pretty warm reception. And again, we got like our first fan email last month, which is pretty exciting. And we are getting more regularly like content submission as well too. So I think that's one of the metrics we're using to kind of just gauge the overall receptiveness.
Cool. Kevin, did you want to ask your question direct? 'Cause I'm not sure who you wanted to address that to.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Pedro and Michael. This was really great to hear about the work you're doing amidst all this for your communities. My question was for Pedro. The partnership with the Sun Gazette was interesting to me, and I'm sure to many people here. And I was curious if you could just share more background on that. My question was just kind of, did you approach them? Did they approach you? Could you expand about how useful or not useful it feels to you and what you're trying to achieve? Just if there's anything else to share on that front.
Sure. Well, I had known some of my contacts through the Sun Gazette through my professional work, through like the environmental justice advocacy. So they kind of knew who I was and stuff, but really it started because we needed a fiscal sponsor for all of this. Because it was just a group of folks in the community that were like, yeah, we want to do this, but the group is currently trying to establish themselves as a 501c3. So we're in that process, but we needed a fiscal sponsor. And so we reached out to a couple of different folks, and and Reggie, who's the publisher, was the most receptive, and he's also the closest one to Ivanhoe. The newspaper is based maybe 20 minutes away from the community. So and it does help that he is one of the like that press is one of the only locally owned or the only locally owned like newspapers in the area. So there's always, I mean, we're just building off of their concern for the community as well. But it does help, like and the newspaper, they actually just provide like, they're more of the guitar text behind the concert scene, you know? So they're really just highlighting all of our work and supporting us to highlight, again, just like what our vision is. So I think that approach and that attitude has been one of the things that has made our partnership the most productive. And again, we wouldn't have been able to you get the model that we are now, which reaches all the households in the community, without their partnership, because they had the contact with the post office as well. Because before that, we were going to do, we were physically going to deliver it by ourselves, and that would have been way more time intensive. And I mean, we still do it, but don't rely as heavily on it. So I think it was actually very beneficial. But I would also like seeing some of the other newspapers and their attitudes towards community stuff. Like, I think it's definitely a special case that we have here. I do wish more broadly it was the norm as well.
Doug had a question about whether your webinar was recorded and if it could be viewed. Maybe we could share it around if it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is. It was recorded. Again, we just did it this Saturday, so it hasn't been posted on our YouTube page. It is available on Facebook, but we can definitely get the link out to y'all as well too, because again, like we do want that, because we want to make sure we can share it and get as much mileage out of these events as possible. And also respect the fact that, you know, sometimes people can't make it on Saturday at 2 p.m., you know, because they're burnt out or in groceries or whatever. So we're going to be circulating this as widely as possible, but also we're going to be developing an article for this next month's edition as well too. So we're going to try to, again, get as much mileage as possible, but I'll make sure y'all get that contact.
So that 1,000 people was viewing it live.
Yes.
That's great. Cool. Jessica asked about the ambassador training, Michael, that you're doing, and if you could share that curriculum sometime or possibly present it in the future, which we're happy to facilitate if we can in some way. I think you're still working on that curriculum, right?
Yeah, I am. It's still a work in progress.
That's cool. We can try to keep everybody posted on that. It's something that Latrell, who's also on this call, and I have been talking with Michael over time about a bit too. And let's see. All right, I think maybe we can, am I missing any other questions, or we can go to our breakouts right now before, I know some people have had to jump off. So let's take a minute. So we're gonna take a couple minutes to talk in smaller groups. And I'd like to invite you all, while you're doing it, if you could start by just sharing one way that you're finding resources to support your engagement work if you're doing it, or if you're not doing it, what you might be planning on doing. You know, maybe we've heard a lot about collaborations that have been important to these projects, you know, either with other media organizations or community organizations. If you could just think a little bit about share a little bit about what you're working on. We won't have time to go through every single thing necessarily at the end, but if you could ask one person to be a note taker, we've put or are about to put into the chat a thing that you can share your notes on. And so if you want to just share some thoughts, we'd be very grateful for that. So I'm going to go ahead, and we're not a huge group, so you should actually have a bit of opportunity to get to talk and know each other for a minute here. So I'll put you into breakout groups, and then we'll circle back at the end just to wrap up. Any last things before I do that? Okay, I'm going to go for this. Okay, happy talking.
I did not.
journalism, whatever that happens to be. Oh, hello.
I'm just lurking. Sorry.
Okay.
We
So,
were trying to remember the questions.
Oh, I mean, whatever you want to talk about is fine, but I was just suggesting that if you wanted a jumping off point, like ways that you're finding resources to support your engagement work.
Friends and family. I have been asking people specifically because we have in Philadelphia the mayor's press conference every day, Monday through Friday, for what they feel that I should be asking the mayor at the press conference. And that's been pretty good. I've been getting a lot of off the beaten path questions. And knock on wood, they've fortunately been 2 or 3 weeks ahead of where the mayor is at. So I asked them 2 weeks ago, can Philadelphia do something like New York does to celebrate the frontline workers at 7? And he was like, yeah, but I mean, we can't mandate that, and it's not organic, Martin. So, and then last night or Saturday, the world record holder for the longest Soul Train dance in the world is here in Philadelphia. They decided they want to do a doorway party starting every night at 6:30. So my response today at the press conference is going to be, hey, Mayor, so you have any comment on how Philadelphians came together to do this celebration? So anyway, my point is that I've asked the family and friends, what should I be asking versus I think a lot of press people in Philadelphia are asking the same question for 3 weeks straight. Tell us the number of city workers and police that have been infected by COVID, and the mayor's office refused. So the media just grabbed onto that and didn't let go. And there's a ton of other things that are happening in the city besides. I'm not saying that's not important to some people, but there were a lot of other questions they could have asked.
So I just put a bunch of links on the chat, but I've been collecting resources for data on society for journalists and putting them in blog posts, and it ranges from reporting practice to research reports on COVID as we're getting more information to the misinformation landscape. I would love to do one on sort of local journalism and what resources are necessary there in the next few weeks if people have any suggestions or if anyone has found resources that are really useful, because I think trying to bridge those national and local networks is really essential right now.
That's great. We'll share this chat and any resources people want to share in our when we send this around. Well, Charles, do you want to share anything about like what the Info Hub's been doing, or?
sure. I think that what we've attempted to do was to have more collaboration with other stakeholders in the city. I think that the crisis has really led a lot of organizations to say, all right, we do this well, this other one does this well, how can we actually collaborate in order to engage audiences in a different way? So what we've done, we've actually started a broadcasted radio show on G-Town Radio, which is a community radio station that is in the Germantown neighborhood. We had done some collaborate, like different things here or there, but we're now having a weekly show where we're talking about different issues in the neighborhood. Martin was actually on one of our broadcasts.
It's good.
So that is one thing that we're doing. We also are partnering with another group, 215 People's Alliance. I may be butchering the name, but they actually have a phone tree where they're basically calling people to basically try and see what they need in terms of we need this, we need that, and trying to provide information and resources that way. And we've started preliminary discussions on having them really do a hyperlocal focus. We're providing information as it pertains to Northwest Philadelphia in a way that could also lead to other story ideas or other coverage ideas from those community members. So those are two ways off the top that we've really done that. And I think that's across the city, because I think that the beauty of Philadelphia is having a number of foundations that are dedicated to news and information. You've seen a lot of funding going toward covering this crisis, and in many cases, the efforts are collaborative in nature. So I think that that's been a significant advantage of being in Philadelphia, is that collaboration is already sort of cooked in, but now we're really doing enhanced collaboration out of necessity. And I think long term, that's going to be a benefit.
Sorry, what was the name of the organization? 215
People's Alliance.
People's
Okay.
Alliance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know about that. That's really helpful, especially for senior citizens. That would be like phenomenal to figure out what I suspect there's a lot of conversation around. I mean, sorry, not a lot. There's no conversation around what senior citizens in nursing home or assisted living need. It's just like, don't visit them, keep them there, and that's it. There's nothing else. And so I really would love to figure out what that looks like. And I have a seniors living center that's not near Germantown, but it's Gray Manor, that I was going to approach to kind of do something similar, to kind of take a survey of what they feel that has not been covered, what questions they may have, because you very rarely hear a senior citizen point of perspective in this whole conversation. Yeah, we're supposed to be protecting them.
I think we should make sure it's not too Philly centric. Philly certainly is a place where collaboration is baked in, as Latrell said, and there's a lot going on. We're very spoiled to have a lot of resources.
Are we though? No, just kidding.
How are things going in Ohio? Sorry, Martin.
In Ohio, the Your Voice Ohio Collaborative has been working for about 4 years, and we were focused on helping journalists cover the election this year by finding out what's important to people, what they think will make their lives better. And we've done all these engagement sessions, listening to more than 1,000 people in urban and rural areas. And we were ready to say, here are the issues when the crisis came along. So now we're trying to figure out, how do we adjust for the crisis? So what we're going to do is, we're going to, we've built an email list of this more than 1,000 people that participated, send some questions back to them about how life has changed, and then go back and talk about, and tell us how the things that they identified in the past year have changed. And then we're going to take the issues that have surfaced to create online conversations of perhaps 8 to 10 people, 4 different conversations in a lot of different communities. So that's how we're trying to adjust, and we've got funding to do that.
I think I have screwed us up by pressing the return to the main session thing early, so we're going to get kicked out here soon. I was trying to give like a 3-minute warning, and I think anyhow, sorry guys. I'm going to go back to the main room. Talk amongst yourselves for a couple seconds here. Sorry, I think I kicked you guys out a little bit prematurely. I was trying to give you a couple of minutes, and it gave you 1 minute. Sorry about that. Technology.
Andrew, did you do some lurking? Because I enjoyed the lurking that I did. I don't know about you.
I did, but I felt bad because there was still much conversation to be had, and I put a stop to that prematurely. So
Zoom happens.
It does.
That's a nice way to put it.
But we're not a huge group actually right now, so we can still talk a little bit amongst our larger group for a minute.
That's a nice thing about this. We've got 16 people at this point, so any of you have questions that you want to continue to put out there, feel free to use the chat. You know, Andrea, I assume that you still would like to do some sort of talk back.
Yeah, I mean, I think if people want to share a little bit about anything that came up in their sessions, and or if people have last questions to our presenters or anyone actually.
Or suggestions for us about how to make this better, because we plan to
Yeah.
keep doing it, and you know, there's a small enough group here that's left that, you know, maybe you feel more comfortable sharing some feedback for us.
One thing that was coming up toward the end of our chat, and I think that this is key, and it was mentioned during Michael's presentation, at some point, we're going to have to combine this engagement related to COVID to talking about other significant issues that are coming up. Because one, people are getting COVID fatigue, but also we have an election coming up. We have everyday life stories that people are doing. So I think that even as we're talking about this engagement related surrounding needs in COVID, we need to also start thinking about how are we going to also cover these other extremely significant issues that have sort of been pushed to the side as a result of COVID.
And this is something that Latrell and I have been involved in some focus groups in Philadelphia with people about the situation. And one thing they say is, you know, we're concerned that with this coverage, other things are getting pushed off. And so we're not hearing about these other community issues, and big things are being done and we're not having the chance to have input on them. So it's a good, great point. Jennifer, did you want to say something about what you put in the chat about Queens Public Library?
Sure.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but go for it. Go for it.
Let me, I guess. You know, I just wanted to add something to what Latrell was just saying about covering other things. You know, we also have to start covering the long-term economic impact of COVID quarantine, because I know in my area anyways, I live in Jackson Heights, which is adjacent to Elmhurst, which is the epicenter of epicenter. The economic impact is going to go on for years, I think. Anyways, regarding the, so that's me. Regarding the Queen's Memory Project, I was working on a project called Project Rosie, working with local groups here in the Jackson Heights area. And we had to stop because, one, quarantine made it harder to engage people. Two, my cub reporter came down with COVID. So now the goal is to help out the Queens Public Library and Queens College, part of City University, with their ongoing oral history project. Originally, it was just focused on, I think, just gathering oral histories in general in Queens. But then when COVID came around, now that the focus is really to get out, get stories from life in quarantine. And for a lot of people, or for some people, life in quarantine means just sitting around in the apartment being bored, yada, da, da. For a lot of people here in my immediate area, it means still going to work without maybe proper PPE. It means trying to self-isolate when you share an apartment with 20 other people, literally. So my goal with that particular project is to elevate these, the voices of often underserved communities. And even though it, you know, I hope, even though I'm not necessarily putting this stuff out as a journalist, I hope that at least by getting these voices on record, that maybe somehow we can be better prepared if and when another situation like this arises. That's all I wanted to say.
It's a really interesting project. And I think that in the future, at some point, we're definitely going to need to have a conversation about libraries and all the amazing things that happen with libraries and journalism. So perhaps that could be a to be continued conversation. Jessica, did you just want to say something? I can't read as fast as I'm.
Yeah, Jessica, you should just sort of summarize this, because I think this is such a great point that you're making and such a good possibility for our future engaged journalism meeting that we have in terms of framing.
Yeah, so I'm just really noticing how many newsrooms across the country are jumping into engagement, many for the first time, or moving forward on desires that they have had, or maybe a lone engager has had. It's kind of opened the floodgates for getting larger organizations to really, and maybe other ones, really focus on what do our communities need, the different what are the different information needs, who's getting them and not, and how do we listen and report back? And that's kind of happening around the country. I know in my newsroom, it's like on fire. And so how do we start thinking now about how to support that going into the future, and how to build a bridge between not just having crisis reporting be about listening and meeting community needs, but having that be something that we grow into in general. So maybe that's a future conversation.
Yeah. And I think there's a resources element to it, because right now in some areas there are resources for COVID related engagement, but when that goes away, what happens?
Yeah, and I also think it just touches on some of the stuff that other folks have mentioned. It brings forward the structural inequities that are being lifted up right now, and how do we kind of like keep those lifted up and then address them in the reporting going forward. So big idea for pondering.
Yes. Well, thank you guys again. I feel like we could probably continue this conversation for a long time, but we should respect everyone's time and let you go. I wanted to especially thank Pedro and Michael for sharing today. And we'll share, we'll circulate this video and other information and contact information for people who want to be in touch, as well as the chat. If any of you have suggestions for me and Jake, we will be doing these again, at least up until the AJMC conference in August. So the next one is June 1st. So mark your calendars now. June 1st, same bat time, 12 o'clock Eastern, 9 in Pacific, and everything else 11 Central. Anyhow, I'll stop. So please, I hope you can join us again, and let us know if you have suggestions for us as far as what you'd like us to focus on. If you have suggestions for people we should invite, that would be great. And thank you again. Thanks, Jake, and thanks to everybody who's made this possible.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being with us.
Take care. It's great to see you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.